about how you can be a better composer, or even start composing. A lot of times I hear from students the hardest thing is to get started. So, what we're going to do is going to kind of take you through what we're going to focus on today, because music composition is crazy. I mean, it can be anything, like instruments, and you can talk about anything. But today we're going to focus on one thing in particular, in melody, and it's like how to write a melody and what makes maybe a good melody. First of all, I don't want to use words you guys don't know. Do you know what a melody is? What does the word melody mean? Do you have a good idea?
It's kind of like the main
Yeah, I love it
part
when
of the song.
I love it when people say the main, because sometimes it's hard to put your finger on, but it's probably the reason. Have you ever played an orchestra song that you really, really loved? Sometimes you love it because you usually say, oh, it's got a great cello part, or it's got a great bass part, but most of the time it's got a great what we call melody, like the main line. And we know violas love it when they get a. And I actually, any viola players out there, can you use your emoji today? I have a special. I actually, we're going to use a viola melody today as our example in a little minute that I'm writing because I love the viola so much. So anyway, we're going to focus on the melody and the main part. So it's the main part that you hear where you're like, listen. So I want you to listen to this. And that's pretty much what I can focus on. Now, can everybody hear me okay? I want to check two things, because while we're doing this, can everybody hear my volume? And did everybody hear that piano nice and clear? Did you hear the piano? It's sharing sound. Okay, that's really important because we're going to be listening to some music. Can you hear my piano in here? Everybody can hear that? Because I'm going to be doing probably a little bit of piano here. I'll switch cameras in a second. Okay, awesome. Thanks. I'll need a little bit of your help as I go. So let's talk about melody real quick. It's the main part, and what are the components of a good melody? Does everybody see how I wrote this right here? I'm kind of scared sometimes to use the word good, because my idea of good and my idea is your favorite piece always the person, your stand partner's favorite piece? Maybe not. But in general, when you think of a melody and you call it good or strong, oh, that's a good melody. I like that. That's catchy. Anybody know like what's a good catchy melody? Like, you guys know Star Wars or something like that, or I love John Williams, so I think some of the Harry Potter themes are great. Well, there are tricks, and there are ways to write a good melody, and they're actually pretty simple. And I want to make sure that you guys know this, and I want you to be able to like check yourself. So today we're going to look at four things. I don't want to look at a million because music composition gets so crazy, but I want to look at four things. Okay, four things that make a good melody. Now, why do you think I have an asterisk right here? Again, good is a word. The most important thing, if you write a melody, do you like it? Are you happy with it? That's fine. A lot of composers other people have to really like it. So if you're writing for a movie, it doesn't, the director has to like it. So, but in this situation, I think the most important thing is, do you like what you wrote? But there are some tricks. So let's get into that. We're going to look at four of them, okay, that are most common, I think, around the world. So does everybody know this? Let's start with a simple tune. Does everybody know this tune? Okay, it's like pretty simple. It's world. You all know it, right? And so I'm using this as an example because, do you guys know who wrote this melody, by the way? Just pop quiz.
I think it's Mozart.
It's Mozart. So the Mozart twin, you're right. And so let's use this just as a first example before we get to a more complex one, just to understand kind of how, when you get started. So we'll start with that one. So the first thing of the four things is what I would say would make a strong case for a great melody, would be a sense of home tone. You may not have heard that, or key. Now, do you guys know how to do that? If you ever sit down to write a melody, what would that mean? Does anybody know what the word key means, or home tone? Okay, let's take a look at, let's go back to what we were just looking at for a second, and let's look at what that is. So home tone or key, if you're Mozart right now, you wrote a little melody, and it's 3 lines here. And what I've circled is you're in the key of C major. So you're playing the notes in C. We don't see any flats or sharps, so it's just the C major scale. And you'll notice that the first 2 notes are C and the last note of the first phrase, and then the same thing at the end. So using what happens is, if you stay sort of in a key and you box yourself in with a set of notes and you use those notes of the scale, it tends to make people, I don't know if it's like feel safe or whatever, but you tend to like kind of gravitate to that quickly. And there are other notes in a scale. How many notes are in a scale total? How many notes would you have to choose from, by the way? Do you guys, well, how many do you, you've probably been trained on this a bunch. I know my students have. What would be the magic number? Would it be 8? Is that
Eight.
correct?
12, I think.
Technically, yes, but how many different notes are in a scale? 8, you know, it's not a scale, but how many different notes are in a scale?
7.
7, correct. So let's look at this. So let's these are the notes in the C scale. Now, C happens twice. So really, you would use these 7 notes. If you use C the most, that's kind of grounded. It keeps you in tonic. It's called tonic. It's like the root. But does anybody know any other notes that would be the most common? There actually is a math to this. Does anybody know the second most common if you're going to go write a melody and you want it to sound like good, you know, anybody have an idea? You can send a chat or you can actually talk. I don't mind when people talk in class. In fact, I encourage it. But does anybody know what the second most popular number would be? I see some people putting 5, and that is probably the second most. So if we go back to Mozart real quick, when I write it, when I'm looking for, you know, when I listen to some great themes, look at what would be the 5 in a C scale. Do you guys remember what the 5 in the C scale? If you choose the C scale, it would be G, right? So if you look right here, all these G's, if you count up all the G's, there's a bunch of them too. Okay, so using these notes, like if you're in a C major scale and you're using B the most or 7 the most or something like that, or 2, in general, 3, they all happen, but in general, you want to stick to, and so if you write a melody, a great way to do this is when you're done and you're playing it and you're kind of like, circle the notes, find out how many times you use the 1 and how many times you use 5. Usually they should be the most common. Okay, now number 2. So do you guys know what leaps and steps are? We're gonna do this in a minute. What is a leap and a step? There's only 2 ways to compose. So you literally either take a jump and you jump up or jump down to a note, or you do a step. Does that make sense to all of you? Now, I can go over here to the piano and I can like make a crazy melody. And to give you an example, this would be a melody that would be all like leaps. Okay, so I'll start on a C and I'll just use the notes in the C scale. And my melody would go. Okay. Can you remember that? Can anybody sing that back to me? Not a chance, right? What was that? What was I doing right there? Was I doing leaps or steps?
Leaps.
Leaps.
Leaps, and not only leaps, was I leaping around like really far too? I was kind of leaping sometimes far. You probably not be able to tell, but leaping around is, everybody wants a leap. It's fun. You know, sometimes violins will see this. You'll be like on one string, you have to like jump over 2 strings and play something really high and be like, whoa. If you did that for every note though, would that be a good melody? Probably not. The most common thing is to do more of these steps. And by the way, what is it called when you go from one note and you go like this? Your next note is the same note. Does anybody know the musical term for that?
Half step.
No, when you stay on the same note. A half step would be either going up or down just a little. What happens when you go like to the same exact note? Does anybody know what that interval is called?
Unison.
Yes, unison for the win. It starts with a U. Correct. I consider that a step, just so you know, but I did want to make it just to make sure you know. Playing the same note is very comfortable as well. Okay, so let's take a look at what our example here is and what Mozart, real quick, let's look at how many leaps he has and how many steps. I don't know if you think about this when you compose, but if we really look at it, there's a jump right here. There's not another jump until you get to the second line. And then there's like one little one here. And then, so we counted them up, and the total on all 3 lines, he has 5 leaps versus 18. That makes it, what does it do for us? It like makes it easier to learn. Like we hear this song twice and I'm like, oh, I already like that. That's pretty good. I got it. And then you can kind of sing it and that sort of thing. So the relationship between leaps and steps, usually you want to be more stepwise when you compose. Now, again, depending on you and your likes, that would be. The third thing is repetition, okay? If I play something on the piano, like that, like I could play, you know. Have you guys, anybody ever heard that piece of music before? It's probably because you've heard it a bunch of times. You know, you've been like, oh, I've heard that here. It's been in a commercial, that sort of thing. Repeating a lot of things is important, but what's really important in making a good melody, in my opinion, is the rhythm of the melody. Okay, so if you take your rhythm, one of the coolest things to do ever is to figure out like a kind of a cool rhythm and use that, and then you go in and you change the notes. I'll show you as an example in a second here, but the rhythm should not change all the time. So keeping something the same. So if we look, has anybody ever seen music that looks like this right here? Sorry. Has anybody ever seen music that, this is what kind of snare drum music. They don't play different notes. It's just on one line here. That is the rhythm. If you remove all the pitches and you were just to play this on one string, what do you notice about the rhythm here? For Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, at least. Is there anything that's different?
It's the same.
How many times is it the same? I want to tell you, I don't know if you ever knew this, but did you know that the rhythm of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, literally, how many times does the rhythm happen? Can you count?
6.
It's 6 times. 6 times, like right here. See, it goes like each 2 measures goes quarter, 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 half, quarter. Now, if I literally played a song like this, you would be so bored. If I just went, except unless you're a bass player, you're probably used to that, right? Bass players, you out there, you guys do that a lot. I get it. But
Yep.
Other than the bass players, violins would be like, this is so boring. What are we doing? You know what I mean? But if you start with that as your bass line, you can do amazing things if you take just the rhythm, okay? So if you just take the rhythm of it, you could like really do some cool things. So having a boring, maybe not boring, but maybe repetitive rhythm that happens a lot, and then have fun with the notes, good things can happen, okay? So and then the last thing, the fourth thing would be balance of phrases. Now I run into a lot of students who don't really know what a phrase is. Does anybody think they can put into words what a phrase, like anything, like what a phrase is? I have my own way. There's no exact answer, but does anybody have a guess what a phrase is?
It's like a set of bars where you kind of like you kind of like explore one idea and then you like have like a cadence.
Yeah. How about this? I'm gonna touch my screen real quick. Can I sit at the piano for 2 seconds real quick? What I want to do is I want to just play something for you, and I want you to see if you think it's a phrase or not. Okay, ready? I'm trying to think. Oh, here's a good one. Okay, if I played something like Tchaikovsky's great at phrases. You said a set of measures, and I think that's right. So it's more of like a complete statement. So if I went like this, you'd be like, what? It needs something else, right? It needs something else. Or if I went like, and then I had rest, and then I went, it feels a little incomplete. Well, one of the things, a phrase is almost like a sentence. It's not a book. It's not even a chapter, but it's like a little sentence. And a lot of times in music, you want phrases to be balanced. If you didn't balance your phrases, things would sound really off kilter. If I went, and then I went, those two things really don't go together. Or I could do, I could change the rhythm. I go, it sounds kind of like disjarred and stuff, and I just turned a 4-measure phrase into like a 3.5 measure phrase. So you want things to sound like balanced. Does that make sense to you guys? And what's the most common phrase? Does anybody know the number of measures for the most common? You do not have to write in this amount of phrase, but it's a good start. Does anybody happen to know that number?
8.
4.
4 or 8. You're both right. I would start with 4. Has anybody ever heard of the Nutcracker?
Yeah.
Tchaikovsky,
Yes.
Tchaikovsky loves. I'll do Tchaikovsky one more time. So here's Tchaikovsky. It's in 2/4. 1, 2, 4. That was one little phrase. Here's another one. Then he repeats itself. Same thing here. The little. That right there, that is a 4-measure phrase. We love 4-measure phrases. I would start there even if you want to be more complicated. And if we just look at phrases real quick, it's easy to tell. There's right here. How many phrases do you guys see on the screen? It's easily marked. How many 4-measure phrases? Yep, 3 phrases. And you want to do this. Usually you want to just be balanced. Okay? So just keep your phrases, try at first, maybe try to box yourself in. Okay? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually writing a piece, and I was asked to do this, and I was like, hey, I'm in the middle of a symphony orchestra piece, and I'm not even done with it. So maybe you guys can look at this with me. And so I'm writing this piece. It's called Return of the Heroes, and I'm like halfway done, and I'm like working on it, and I'm like, okay, this is for the violas, by the way. Violas. I was like, I want to write a phrase, and I was like, oh, I kind of like this phrase. I'll use this for this session that I'm doing. So this, even though the violas are playing, these are the people playing with you violas: 2 horns, 2 clarinets, and an English horn. If you don't know what those are, that's another masterclass. Okay, so we'll talk about those later, but you can look those up. But this is basically, they're all kind of middle of the orchestra instruments. Okay. And then I want to check myself. So I got nervous because I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to these students about a good melody. So I'll just use my melody because I'm a composer. So let's look, but I haven't published it yet or anything. So I was a little nervous. So what I'm going to do is let's check for the 4 components of this melody, and we'll look at it. And this is it right now. Now, to help everybody, I realize you're not all viola players. So does everybody realize what they're looking at right now? Does everybody see this? I wrote the viola melody, and then I just transposed it up for violins and cellos and basses so you can read the music, just in case. Because how many of us can read alto clef? Yeah, nobody, except the violas, except all the violas' hands went up. So nobody really reads this clef right here. So let's do this. Let's listen to it real quick. So this is the melody, and I'm just gonna play it. All right, did you kind of hear it? Okay, now that's that. Now what I decided to do, I was like, well, I really like the melody in the context. Now listen, I have it with like drums and trombones and all the instruments and the basses are all playing, but that's just the one melody. Remember, we're only talking about melody here. So I went ahead and tested myself. One more thing, I think it might help if I do play just real quick for you guys, just on the piano, just to give you an idea of what the melody. I'll play it. Here's the melody, just down here with a bass line. It might make more sense. So did you guys I don't know if the melody makes more sense when I add the bass a little bit. I just wanted to give you a little more like context. There's probably 50 to 80 people playing with this viola. So violas play loud, okay? You gotta play it really loud. All right, so let's look at what I did is, and I think you guys should do this, and I think this is one of the best ways to kind of check yourself and start down and write a melody. I went ahead and circled. How did I do? Do you guys see? That's me grading myself. What did I circle? Let's make sure. What are the red? What are the red notes? Remember, we're checking. This is the first thing was to check our home tone and our key. Did I use like the number one? I used a scale D minor. So I put a red box around all the D's, which is like our home tone. How many do you see? Like how many do you see? A few. So I did all right, right? And then what are the greens? Does anybody happen to know what the green would be? I put a box around those because those are really important to having a good melody too.
So the 5th and the D minor.
Fifth. So all I did was I went like this. There's no perfect melody except for Dvorak, Largo New World Symphony. Go check it out. It's the best one. English one's second. But other than that, the home tone, this is just telling me, I went to check myself and I was like, I did okay. I don't know if I get 100, but I did okay. It's the basics of a small, but let's do the actual count. So this was the actual count. Remember how we said there were 7 notes in a scale? Not really 8, but 7 notes, you know. These are the occurrences. So what went wrong? You know, following the rules, look at this. I actually used C 8 times. I only used my tonic 5, but I went down here and this is the number of beats that it was sitting there. Do you understand what I mean by beats? That's how long the note is like being held out. So actually I did use D the most. So high five, Mr. Bernstein did all right. Okay, so I did okay, I did all right, but that's the number. And so it's important to kind of do that and just use your 7 notes and say, how many times did I use this note? You know? Okay, and then the second thing was what I said, leaps and steps. Now you don't know what this is, but can everybody just sit back and just look at this right there? There's the whole viola melody, ready? What color do you see the most of? Just if you had to guess real quick at the beginning.
Yellow.
That is correct. And
Yellow.
What is yellow? Yellow would be the steps or the leaps?
Steps.
Steps.
Good, so I passed. So this is what I did is I went with my own melody and I was like, let me just highlight all the steps of my melody. Well, I actually did all right on this one. What were the red? The red are you remember what we
Unison.
called them? They're the
Unison.
same notes. So those are great too. And then I used a decent amount of leaps. So I feel like I did all right on that. But that's one thing you can do to just check, just to check and make sure like am I leaping more or am I stepping more? And then that's the number. So technically, does anybody know what 17 plus 7 is? What's 17 plus 7 in math? Geniuses.
24.
24.
Okay, so 24, I did 24 steps versus 10 leaps. I would consider that a B at least, okay? So I did all right. And so the third thing we wanted to do was the rhythms. And remember the rhythms, Mozart did the same rhythm every time. He just went like this. Well, I only did 3 rhythms. I don't know if you remember the melody, but I went like this. But that is basically this, twice in a row. Okay? And then the green box I did 4 times, 3 times. And then the last rhythm I did twice. So what I did was I actually sat down at a piano and I really liked that rhythm. And I think the rhythm is what makes this totally work. I had fun with the notes, but I did that for like weeks. But I kind of like just found this thing that kind of grooves and the rhythm is like this. And so I basically had this kind of rhythm thing, and that for me in particular is what drove this composition. So I only used 3 rhythms, which kept it kind of easy, and then the phrase is just 1 and 1. How long is each phrase? Gives everybody a good counter. Are you guys pretty good counters in music? It's not exactly lining up with the bars, but how long is each phrase?
4 measures.
4 measures.
So I basically played by the rules in this one, okay? So I basically, played by the rules. I did 4 measures and 4 measures. I wanted to keep it really, really kind of easy. And then this part at the end, just so you know, this is kind of a tail end. This is actually the beginning of the next phrase where I give there's a little transition period and I give the melody to like the horns and then we move up to the trumpets. So it's the violas, sorry violas, you don't get the melody forever, you just get the melody like for 8 bars. And then we got to give it to the louder instrument because it's got to like build more excitement. So violins, you get it too. So you guys are winners in this piece too. So that's the basic, what I would say gist. And then I wanted to just play like, do you want to hear what it sounds like? Just like when you put it all together kind of thing. So what this is this is the piece, not the whole piece. This is just the 4 measures before the viola part. And I want to show you, can everybody see my cursor? It'll clear up in a second, but do you see where I'm doing right here? This is where the violas are. So what you're looking at is this is all percussion up here. And these 5 lines right here will be violin, violin 2, or violins. They're only playing whole notes. And look what they're doing when the violas, this is the best ever. Look here's you with the melody, and look what the violin 1s are doing. They're resting. That doesn't happen very often, right? So, but they come in later, and some high stuff, they get some. But anyway, long story short, you're gonna hear 4 measures, and then listen to see if you can hear this melody, the viola. Of course, there's gonna be a lot of other instruments playing. Let's see if it works. Did you hear everything? Did you guys got to get how it works? Now, I was really nervous because I picked this melody, and I wrote that melody before I did this. So I set up this rules, but those are kind of my 4 things just to keep it easy. So when you sit down, and we'll talk about what you do when you sit down here in just a minute. But I was like, what if I like fail one of these 4 things that I'm determining? So luckily, I don't think I failed anything. I think I got a B maybe in the B minus in the department of the leaps, not leaps and steps, the home tone, the key. I spent a lot of time on 5, but that's okay. I'm still happy with it because at the end of the day, I like my melody, whether you do or not. But I'd love for you to like it or enjoy playing it. I also like it when people enjoy playing the melody. So let's go to the next one. Okay. So hopefully I'll get that published at some point here soon. Now, how do you guys write a melody? Are there any composers in here right now? Are there any, does anybody like dabble a little bit? Like, does anybody do, if you're not a composer, it's fine. When I first started, I did not know what I was doing and I had no idea and I just started messing around. One thing that really helped me is you guys told me what instruments you play. At my age right now, I've played all of the instruments. So when I was at JMU, when I was getting my undergrad, I actually played in the concert band. I played English horn and oboe. Do you guys know what that is? And I played bass clarinet. Have you ever seen one of those giant clarinet thing looking things? It's got a big curve. I played that in the Wind Symphony, and I played French horn, and I did. Now I'm not telling you that just because I'm like I play all the instruments. I did that because that was super helpful when I compose because I know how they work. Has anybody ever played a different stringed instrument? If you get the opportunity to, it really helps. Now, I'm not telling you, don't go home to your orchestra directors and be like, Mr. Bernstein told me to switch instruments and I'm going to switch to this. They'll kill me. Don't do that. Stick with one and get really good at that one. And then but seriously, it's the best thing. If you want to write, go figure out how a clarinet works. You're going to sound horrible at first, but honestly, it's pretty cool. So how do you get started? It's limitless. You may sit down at a piano and be like, this is hopeless. I'm the worst. I can't come up with anything. I'm just going to sit here and hit keys. That happens to me all the time, by the way. On a Tuesday, I think I'm the worst composer. And then on Wednesday, I'm like, I'm the best again. And then on Thursday, I'm like, I'm the worst. So every day, it's, depending on the day. But I think the best thing to do for you guys is to set some limits. And so what I think you can do is these are 4 things I think you can do right from the beginning. And I don't know if you do these things. What do I mean by established mood? Well, if you sit down and you're going to write a piece of music, can anybody tell me what the mood, just judging by that viola, does anybody know what the mood I was going for is? Can you guess? There's no wrong answer, except for if you say super happy and jolly.
Dramatic.
Or like a march.
It's a little
like
march,
the bad guys are coming in.
But what mood? See, you're doing, that's like a description, but what mood? So if you would never say, I feel march today. I feel like marching. You would say, I feel like what? What are they marching to do?
Kind of dramatic.
Yeah, a little dramatic. Okay, cool. This is really, how about like, what was the name of the title? Does anybody remember what it's called? Return of the
Heroes.
Eventually
Heroic.
for something heroic. And by the time the violins come in and the trumpets, I think you guys would get it, but hopefully you'll hear that one day. But anyway, establish your mood. Just be like, am I going for a creepy song? Am I going for a little mysterious thing, like with like Harry Potter sounding? Or am I going for something like happy? Because that way, when you write something and you're like this, like, if you write something really happy, like, and you'll know real quick by playing it, you'll be like, that's not the mood I was going for. And it's okay if your mood changes. And then I would say, pick a scale or key. See the green right here? Pick a scale or key. Pick a time signature. That's another thing. I love pieces in 3/4. It's probably my favorite time signature. I love things in 3/4 and force yourself to kind of like have that like, that waltz feel. And then maybe just decide on a number of phrases, number of measures. Be like, I'm just going to write 4 measures because it's very intimidating. I write symphony orchestra pieces, but you know what it starts off at? It starts off at, I'm going to write a viola melody that's 4 measures long. And I might work on that for like a week until I'm like, okay. And normally I'm like, okay, that's going to be all right. So just box yourself in. Does anybody know what chords are? This is a great way. This is what I said. Does anybody play the piano? This is kind of important, but not. Don't think if you don't play. If you all play piano, that is a huge thing. Why do I say that? For those of you non-piano players, I'm not saying anything bad, but I'm just saying, why is piano a great instrument? Just for composition in particular. Does anybody know?
Because it forces you to play chords a lot.
Oh, you can play more than one note. Now I know strings, you can play up to 4 notes. I get it and all that stuff, but piano is great. Another instrument, if you happen to know guitar, I don't know if we have any guitar players, that's kind of cool to strum around, but I think piano is the best because you can play these like cool chord progressions, and some people compose from chords. So I'm just real quick, I was going to show you, this is how I sometimes compose. I sometimes go like this. I would go, and then maybe I'll add a bass line, just some rhythm in the bass. Now, what I would do is, a cool technique is to get a cool chord progression and then record it or put it in and like basically have it on a loop. Do you guys know what a loop is? And then you're like boxed in because you're like, okay, I got to come up with a melody that fits onto that. That is a really cool way with coming up with melodies. And you just have that thing going over and over again. And then you can start. I know some of you may not think you're big singers or anything because we're orchestra. We don't sing. What are you talking about? But I know some of you sing. But you can sing and you can actually just make stuff up like ba-da-ba, whatever you want to do. And that doesn't have to be the melody. That could be the little thing you just give the violins because you're a viola and you're composing for violas. You don't, I give the violins whatever. Or you might just be like, maybe that's the bass part. Maybe the basses are going to go da da da. Maybe I like even this chord progression right here. I could do the bass line. I could go da da da. You know, something like that. And just mess around. But remember, if you do a rhythm, keep it somewhat the same. And people will be like, oh, I like that. Because if you do things once, people don't get an opportunity to say, I like that. You got to hit them over the head about twice or 3 times until they're like, man, stop hitting me. Or they're like, man, I really like that. That sounds kind of cool. So usually that is another cool kind of way to do that, to come up with kind of a melody, like a decent melody. Now, I'm just going to tell you a bunch of things that I do. Does anybody, first of all, do any of you have an idea of how to come up with a melody? Like, how do you come up with one? Anybody know? Does anybody have? Go ahead. Anybody? Just an idea. Just real quick. No? It's hard.
I mean, I usually start off with like probably quarter notes, and then I try to build off of that bass line, or like just like the quarter notes, and try to add a little bit more fun to it.
That's good. So you start with a bass line, basically. Okay, that is a great line. That's kind of what I was doing. Anybody else? I saw some hands. Okay,
Maybe
Rhea?
just fiddle around and then see what you like.
Okay, I'm gonna stop there. She said fiddling around at the bottom. I think the most important thing is to do what I call like improvising. And listen, sorry, I'll switch my camera here in just 2 seconds. You just like kind of improvise. You just kind of mess around and then you're like, oh my, anybody ever do that? And they're like, okay, that's okay. I might like that. You do that? Patrick, do you do a little, how do you do it?
Sometimes random melodies pop into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I could create something based off that.
Okay, do you write it down?
Not really. I do play it on the piano.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys some tips real quick about like how to come up with a melody. Does anybody else, is it Rhea or Raya? Can you tell me what I thought I saw.
Rhea.
Right, Rhea, how are you?
I was thinking like sometimes I get stuck a lot of times, and I think just listening to a bunch of different music can also help you and see what other people are doing. You don't
Yes,
but get some
you know
idea.
Rhea, I didn't even put that in here, but I will say this, just because I've been in music since I was like really young, and you can't put this words on this, but I've listened to like millions of hours of music, right? And you don't know what effect it has on you. But there are composers that are devastated because they get stuck for months because it's what they love to do. If I got stuck for months, I would be pretty sad. I'm still happy because I teach orchestra and I like love my students and I like I have a good life. It's all great. But what I'm saying is, a part of me would be like really sad if I couldn't like write. So I think that's a perfect piece of advice because I could go listen to some Elgar and I could be like, man, it would just inspire you, right? And then you could go do that. Well, I'm going to give you just some like easy things. This is just going to be kind of a list thing, but this is some things I do, and I want to know if you do any of these things. This is just little things that I do. Okay, so I write out a key, and force yourself to start with those notes, like determine your key. Okay, you experiment with those words, and if actually, do you guys know how to play chords on a piano? A lot of you said you play piano chords. Kind of messing around with chords. That's another way to do it. Just mess around with chord progressions and see if you get a cool one. Try to come up with a rhythmic figure you like. I have another, you could do a whole nother session on just doing fun rhythms that are super cool to play. Do you guys ever do those in orchestra where you get like something where like the rhythm is like, where you'd be like, oh, that's an interesting rhythm. I haven't seen that. We're doing one here. It's really complicated actually. You guys all play an instrument. You can come up with a melody on your instrument. Do you guys know what a loop is? Like a rhythm loop, kind of like a drum loop? That, for me, that works when I have like when I come up with a cool like beat, then I can start thinking like, oh, what rhythm would go well with this? That's another way I do it. I think even if you don't know how to play piano, sitting down at the piano, might as well start someday. So that's one way. That's where I spend the most of my time. You can always sing. I never forget. When I was in middle school and high school, I worked at a kennel. You guys know what that is with dogs? And I used to work with dogs, and obviously there were no pianos in a kennel. I was like scooping up dog, you know what, and I was like cleaning dogs and washing and feeding dogs, and there wasn't a lot of music going on. So I had to make my own music because it was like me bored, and we didn't have iPhones or headphones and all that stuff. So I was just like with a hose, but there was a cool echo in the kennel. So my voice sounded better than normal because I don't have the best voice, but I'm all right. So I would just like hum some things, and the only problem is I would really not be able to write them down. So I'd have to do it the rest of my shift. So I think the best thing to do is just kind of like mess around. The more you mess around, the better chances you may have to find something you like that you've done. And then I asked Patrick, I said, Patrick, do you write that down? And the reason why I say that is because I can't tell you, there's probably several melodies that may have been cool melodies that I could have come up with. And some people even tell me they like dream about melodies, you know, like they wake up in the middle of the night, they're like, I had a vision, you know, and I wish I did. I don't really have visions in that way. I kind of work at it. I think you really can just sit down and work at composition and melody, but please write it down, put something down, record it, because the next day, do you guys ever forget stuff? Are you guys perfect? I'm just letting you, I don't know if you
All
guys,
the time.
yeah, me too. I forget a lot of things. And if you don't write stuff down, you can't come back to it. So sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot what I was, and then usually it'll come back down. So these are just some ideas to come up with a melody. And then I just wanted to tell you guys, like, what do I use to help me compose? And this is kind of my order of things. Does anybody have any questions just about this list? So piano is my best friend. Why do I have a phone here? Does anybody know why?
To record something so you remember it if you
Yeah.
don't have like a notebook.
Yeah, because sometimes I'm lazy and I'm like, don't feel like writing it out, but I'll like sit there and play on piano and I'll be like, I'm just gonna record this because it's just easier. Because I'm actually not, I'm writing out like maybe chord progressions and it's just too much. I'm like, I'll just record this and figure it out later. That's good, you know, that's great. And then those are my 3 programs that I use. Did you guys just hear the orchestra playing a minute ago? Like that's kind of what I use, those 3 programs. Has anybody ever heard of Finale or Sibelius? Those are 2 programs. I've used both of them, and that's kind of, these are the things that I kind of use. So what I can do is this. Has anybody ever heard of flat.io? No? Okay, you have? Nithra, have you used it before? It's a great program.
No, I haven't used it, but I saw it when my friends were using it, so that's how I know what it is.
Okay, but this is what my idea was. There's no way we can all like at the same time compose. One thing about it, are you all in orchestra? You are, right? Everybody's in an orchestra. What's this? Now, some of you may be at home right now, but what's a great part about orchestra is that it's a group of people, and when you all get together, it's like the magic happens, right? And you're like, whoa, like listen to the basses back there. And if you're not listening to the basses, start listening to the basses. Even though they have the low parts and stuff, they're really cool. But when everybody starts playing together, it's like magic. There's something special about playing in a big group. There's also something really important about being able to do something by yourself, right? You should be able to play your instrument. You should be working on a solo, all of that kind of stuff. But it's not the same as playing in a big orchestra. Do we all agree? Do you know what I'm saying? When you play with a big orchestra, it's like, yes. Composing is very different. It is a very personal thing. That's why it's a little hard to do, you know, a session with, you know, I love seeing so many people, but it kind of is, it's very rare. In fact, I can think of only a few things ever in like the world where 2 people or 3 people work on like orchestra pieces. I don't know what you're writing for, but normally when you go to play an orchestra piece, how often does it say written by this person, this person, this person, this person, and this person? It normally is not a team of people. It is normally one person. And it's a very personal experience. And each one of you is individually different. And you may be like, but I don't actually like that. And that is perfectly fine. You may want to have a 5-measure phrase. You go write your 5-measure phrase. Go listen to Mars. Like, that's cool. That's a 5/4 piece, you know, give you a little experience and something like that, or, you know, but it's one of those things where I want to set you off and try to see if you guys can do this on your own. Some of you may have never composed. Some of you may already have like a piece like ready to go. But I do know that what I can offer you is this. There's not a lot of composition like people to help, right? There's just not. And so what I've done is just, if you're interested, I've set up a flat IO account for each of one of you. And what that means is this. I'm going to send you a link, and you just hit the link, and you don't have to do this, by the way. I'll call it like an assignment, but it's not an assignment. You don't have to do it. But if you do want feedback from someone who is working in composition, I work in it all the time, I'm happy to do that. The program is actually called flat.io. You know how it's like something.com? That's just, it's just IO. And it's great and it's free and it's easy to use. I put in a video on like just a quick like how to use it kind of thing, but you can be up and running in like 5 seconds to write a melody, and it allows you to print it off, PDF, whatever you want to do, and you can turn it in. And if you want, I can help you, give you feedback, and it can be as complicated as you want. So what I would do is I would send that to you. If you all you need, do you guys all have an email address though? You have just any email address. You don't have to like sign up or anything like that. That's all you need is just to put, and then it's like basically you would be good to go. And then if you want feedback and you want to get something started like a piece, I'm happy to help you. And it's open for 75 days. Okay, so if you get stuck, then that's okay. Does that work if I send that to you? Okay, does anybody have any questions, like anything at all about composing?
I'm curious, why do you say that the Largo from the New World Symphony is the perfect melody?
So, I think it was, everybody's different, right? And so I'm different than you and everybody's different. I actually was at JMU. We were performing the Dvorak Cello Concerto. Okay, does anybody know what that is? Okay, we were performing. Now, when I say cello concerto, I am not a cello player by any means. So I was actually playing French horn at the time on that piece. And I remember sitting in orchestra. And do you ever have one of those moments? You guys probably don't because you're string players in an orchestra. So you're always playing, right? It's very rare that you're just playing all the time. Well, if you play French horn, here's what you do a lot. You look at your part and it says 75 measures of rest. I'm not even kidding, because they don't play as much. So you get to listen to all the string players. And I sat back and I was listening to the Dvorak Cello Concerto, and I thought, this is it. This guy Dvorak is it. Do you guys know who I'm talking about, Dvorak? If you don't know, it's okay, but I can send you a chat with this. But don't anybody send me the chat real quick, because I'm gonna send this to all of you. I'm just gonna spell his name, his last name, because it doesn't spell like it sound. Okay? And did everybody get that from me? You guys get that? Okay, so
Yep.
he wrote a New World Symphony. Then we played the New World Symphony the next year, and I was like, this guy keeps getting better and better. And so I now have all the Dvorak symphonies, but there's an English horn solo for anybody who doesn't know. It's in the second movement, and it goes like this. Here. It's like... Have you guys ever heard this before?
No, but it's nice.
And then it goes like this. It goes to the clarinets, and then the clarinets and it goes over there. And guess what I'm doing during that whole time? Not playing, right? Because I'm a French horn player. We don't play much. We just sit back there and listen to everybody and just like sit back there and judge you guys. Like, ooh, listen to the violas. They just messed up. We don't really do that. But what we do is we get to hear all the beautiful things, and I get to hear all the instruments go like this together. And that also makes you a good composer, because you know what I really like is the English horn. So do you know what instrument I always include in all my symphony orchestras? Now, you may not have even seen an English horn before, but because I get the experience in an orchestra, that makes me a better composer. But I thought that was one of the nicest melodies I've ever heard. Still to this day, I don't know if one beats it. So that's the answer to that story. I sat there and listened to it. It sounded beautiful. And the instrument I played isn't even in the whole thing, but it didn't matter to me because it was so beautiful. And it makes me want to write a piece as beautiful, which I probably will never do, but I'll keep trying. And that's hopefully, one day we'll see. But I promise you this. Do you know that melody in Dvorak? Guess what he did? He uses home tone the whole time. He does 4-measure phrases. He goes like this. He does more steps than leap, and he comes right back to 1. And it's he followed by the rules. And not to say that you have to, but man, I loved it as soon as I heard it. So you do you, but I just think this is some ideas to help you maybe get started. Box yourself in and just be a better composer if you can. Okay? My recommendation also would be don't start writing for symphony orchestra first. Symphony orchestra has about 50 different instruments to write for, so start with what you know. Maybe start with a piano, or start with a string quartet, or maybe just a cello solo, anything you want. and then start adding things as you go. Like, you know, like Alex was saying, maybe start with one and then like build and build and build and see what you can do. I always knew I wanted to write for symphony orchestra because I love all the things. I like all the percussion and the big noises and stuff like that. So, any other questions?
Hey, Ben, you got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I'm good. I just wanted to check with them. That is it. What I'm going to do is I'm at the end right here. I'm just going to send them in the chat the link to the information for Flat IO in the class. When you guys enter, it'll just say "Welcome to Spring String Thing Composition," and then you're done. That's all it is. You don't have to do anything else. So, does anybody else have any questions during the last few minutes about anything at all?
How long does it usually take to write a piece?
So that is a good question. So I've written an orchestra piece in as short as 3 days. And really, it only took me 3 days because the editing portion, you guys know what I mean by editing? You write a piece like here, and then you have to get it on paper, and then you have to make it look good so that you guys can read my music. That takes just almost as much time as the composing if you don't have an editor. So you guys know all the articulations? And I'm really picky. So if I want the violins to play short, I'm gonna like make sure they have all the things in there and all the articulation and dynamics. And so it takes me a long time. The longest it's taken me, I'm still working on a piece I've written is the musical. And I'm like 3/4 of the way done with the musical. Have you guys ever heard of The Count of Monte Cristo? Does anybody know that story? I'm on like that. Anyway, it's a story about this crazy revenge. But like, anyway, it could take years and years and years. But most of pieces, I would say it would take me a few months just because I do other things. I don't sit in a dark room. I go to the beach, I teach orchestra, I go out to dinner, and I do things. But I always make room for composing because it's my favorite, I think.
Hey, Ben, there's a great question in the chat about, is there a way to make sure that the song you think of doesn't already exist?
So that is a good, very, very good question. One time, I think you could you guys would know better than me if there's like an app or something like that. But I would say, you know, that's hard because one time I wrote a piece like, you know, and I went down to Brevard, you guys, anyway, it's long story short, I wrote this great summer camp, like for orchestra musicians. I play with amazing orchestra musicians, and I wrote this piece and I like presented it, and I did it in a cabin, like I did it in a dark cabin, like, and I wrote it in the woods, and I was like, here we go, let's play this piece. And I got together this orchestra of 50 people who were amazing, and we played it. And the string players were like, this is Mahler's like sixth. And I was like, I've never heard Mahler's sixth. And I went and compared Mahler's sixth, and two of the measures were like really similar. And so I was like, well, that is, Mahler's got great taste. No, I'm kidding. But I really believe, I've never heard Mahler's sixth, but once I heard it, his was way more complicated and everything. But do you guys know of any app? I know there's apps for like, is this, you know, to find out a song, but I'm not sure. But I would say just play it for a lot of people. They'll tell you. Is there an app, Johnny?
Yeah, I've got one. I don't remember exactly what it is, and I know it's not like a 100% it will tell you, but I remember I found it last year. It's called Musopedia. It's a website,
Yeah.
and there's like one of the tools on it. You literally just type in a U, an R, or a D following the melody. Like if the next note goes up, is repeated, or goes down.
Okay.
And like once you get like 20 notes in, it's gonna be like dead on almost every time. So if you put in your melody in that, then you can probably see if it matches that, and then you can listen. It gives you like links to YouTube recordings or whatever there is.
Tell us real quick the name of it real quick, Johnny.
Musopedia, like just Wikipedia, but then it Musi instead of Wiki.
Perfect. So that's one way. Other than that, if you have a favorite composer and all you do is listen to Star Wars, maybe your music might sound a little like Star Wars. So just check it. You know, just be like, am I playing Yoda's theme right now? I don't know, but that's okay. It'll still give you practice, you know. So I would say that. But other than that, you know, I really appreciate you guys all being here, and you know, I hope like you do take advantage. I'm going to send you right now the link. If you have any problems, I'm going to put my email as well. And that way you guys can have it, because if you have any technical issues, I can't fix that right now. But what I can do is I can help you, but I just won't be able to do it here. So give me 2 seconds and I will send this all to you real quick in the chat. And
Someone also asked in chat if you could send the slideshow.
Take a what? Send what?
Someone asked in chat if you could also send the slideshow in chat.
So I think Spring String thing is doing that. So
We are recording all of the sessions and then we'll put them up on YouTube when this day is done.
okay, and right now I'm sending all of you this, and this is just a link. So just kind of copy this down, and that should get you in the class. Remember, you just have to put an email address. And then if you guys want feedback, I'm here, and it'll send me a notice when you guys kind of write something. And I'm happy to give you some feedback. I know it's kind of hard out there. It's a lonely profession sometimes. So I'm happy to help you guys out if you guys want a little feedback on some composing. Okay? So other than that, it was really nice meeting you. Keep up with your string instruments, and hopefully I'll work with you at least one day, you know. And those of you, I know I'll see you Tuesday morning, some of you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
Mr. Bernstein.
Guys.
Thank you.
Great.
I'll see you Tuesday.
I'll see you
See
guys.
you Tuesday.
See you Tuesday.
What if I already have a music notation software?
Then you could just use that, and I know.